Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Made Fits show. So, today's guest is an incredible story of transformation and healing. She was once trapped in the cycle of emotional eating and a lifelong struggle with food. She faced deep trauma, disconnection, and a full blown eating disorder. Through her journey, she discovered that true healing goes from beyond diet and nutrition, which I think is so key and what I'm really excited to talk about. With advanced training in dietetics, functional medicine, and trauma informed care, she now helps those uncover the root causes of their struggles, blending cutting edge science with the power of emotional healing and even therapeutic psychedelics. So excited about that. As the founder of the Root Cause Method, she's helping people experience profound freedom, body, mind, and spirit. So please welcome Miss Jillian Acosta. It's so nice to have you on the show, ma'am.
Thank you so much for having me.
You bet. So, in preparing for this podcast, I did my research, always do my research, and your journey is really, really powerful. Can you just kind of take us back to the moment that you decided to check yourself into an eating disorder treatment center that drove your decision? And if there's any kind of backstory that you'd like to share before that
Yeah.
bold question. I would love for you to kind of share what got you to where you are and then, that point that you're like, you know what, I need to take care of myself.
Yeah, amazing. I think I was 22 years old when I decided to check myself into treatment for an eating disorder. And the synchronicities of events is pretty mind-blowing. I was struggling and had been struggling so severely.
Mm.
And I was living with a roommate at the time who was like, she bought like a gossip magazine or whatever and left it in like the coffee table of the living room. And so I was scrolling through, and for some reason, on the very, very last page, in like the bottom right hand corner, was this tiny advertisement for this book called Food, the Good Girl's Drug by Sunny Seagold. And it was like all of my entire body lit up and was like, you must buy this book. And it was that book that was like, binge eating disorder is a thing. And this was before it was like known. And this is what it looks like. And this is how, people use food. And it was the first time in my life that I realized that there was a name for what I had been experiencing, that other people had experienced things like this. And honestly, with like so much fire in my belly, I think like the next day I was asking for an interview to be admitted into that program. But of course, my journey didn't start there. I had been struggling for a long time, and my relationship with food started from a dysfunctional perspective, from an emotional perspective. Well, honestly, when I was 3 years old,
Really?
it yeah, I was obsessed with candy. I was obsessed with the just the delightful experience of like treats and desserts and sweets,
Sure.
and it was beyond like the innocent, yeah, everybody loves that stuff. It was like I was using it to alter my internal state. I was using it to dissociate. And I didn't understand why, because I was 3 years old, and we don't have that level of awareness. And that just kind of became the way that the way that I dealt with all things. And in my teens and early 20s, it had become a full-blown diagnosable eating disorder. I was struggling with
Mm.
bulimia and binge eating. And again, I didn't understand why. And so seeking help in treatment was expansive for me because I met other people on that journey, but it was very focused in like, behavioral modifications. It was like, if you recognize your trigger, do this, this, and this. And it was like, well, why am I triggered? What's
Mm.
triggering the trigger? What is underneath this thing that is causing me to feel like I'm actually being hijacked? And
Yeah.
I don't even want to eat this stuff. Like it
Yeah.
was so, it was so deep on the nervous system level. And it wasn't until I was 32, so 10 years later, that I first sat in an ayahuasca experience and learned that I had been sexually abused as a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old. And all of the pieces of the puzzle, all of the reasons of dissociation and self-hatred and loathing and all
Mm.
of the things just made so much sense to me. And
Mm.
it just really solidified this path, this journey of like excavation and exploration and self-knowing,
Mhm.
to now like it's my greatest joy to use all that I've learned on my journey to help others free themselves.
Yeah. I'm so sorry to hear about that. That breaks my heart so
Yeah,
much.
And it's like why I'm here right now, you know?
Yeah.
And it's not to
Yeah.
like cover that up because that's obviously horrible. And I
Yeah.
literally wouldn't have anything to say to you right now had that not happened to me.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Oh, my goodness. Before like I told you before we pressed record that, there's just that you have these wonderful specialties that I don't think that we've talked about enough on this podcast. And just eating disorders is one of them. Would love your perspective on that. But can you, before we get into eating disorders, the difference between, what is coined disordered eating versus eating disorder? Do you believe that there is a difference between those two things? And if there is, can you give kind of like definitions of each one so people kind of understand if maybe they've just got, they're a little skewed from food just triggers them a little bit, or that it is a full blown disorder?
Yeah, I love this question so much because, in my perspective, the vast majority of people carrying excess weight or under malnourished or just in engaging in a very like rigid, uh, energy consuming relationship with food struggle with a disordered eating. They have a disordered relationship with food, but it's not necessarily a diagnosable condition from the DSM-5, which is, by the way, a psychiatric condition. And so I think, to limit it to that diagnosable criteria, first of all, like minimizes the amount of people that actually belong in there. Because like let's think about just binge eating, for example. It's like eating a large amount of food in a short amount of time, eating past the point of fullness, eating maybe to the point of discomfort, eating when you're not hungry.
Mm,
And entering into like spaces of like self-loathing or self-deprecation afterwards. Also like feelings of loss of control. That's a lot of people.
yes.
The masses.
Me. Yeah, I think honestly, there's many times that I feel like I've fallen into that. So now I'm
Totally.
like, yeah, uh-oh.
Yeah, and my perspective is like not like let's diagnose everybody and get everybody
Right, right.
on some sort of protocol for that. No, it's just like the diagnosis is kind of, I think, working not in our favor in this realm. I
Yeah.
think like it really the criteria is so applicable to so many people. And so what do we do with that? Well, in my perspective, it has nothing to do with food. I think the person who is carrying the most weight or the person who is in a very compromised space because of anorexia nervosa, either, pole or anyone else on that spectrum, it still has nothing to do with food.
Mhm.
It's how willing we are to be with discomfort, how
Yeah.
willing we are to feel our feelings. And
Mm.
food, in my perspective, has been a lever or a mechanism to dilute our emotional experience, distract ourselves, or dissociate from our emotional experience. And by the way, it serves us. Like I needed that when I was 3 years old because if I was like actually facing what I was up against, it would
Yeah,
have been overwhelming to my psyche.
absolutely.
Who knows what it would have broken my mind.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it
for sure.
serves, but it also comes with a lot of costs.
Yeah. I have been in the health and wellness space, the fitness world and all of that for shoot, going on 30 years now. And a term that I think we do hear a lot too when we're still in the spectrum of talking about eating disorders or disordered eating, is the orthorexia. Is that how do you where does that fit? Is that something that has been diagnosed as an eating disorder? Is that something that's in the books, or is that something that's
Yeah.
just kind of become just a popular word through social media and the health space?
No, it's an actual diagnostic,
Okay.
like a diagnosis rather.
Okay.
And it kind of like attaches in the category of bulimia
Hmm.
because it's not necessarily like a self-induced purge or like vomiting, but it's a control mechanism. It's like what's the word that I want? I don't have access to it. Yeah, it's like oh my God, what is this word? It starts with a C. Anyways, it's like a way to counteract what's been done. So you eat a lot of food in the same context, you feel out of control, you enter into that self-loathing, and it's kind of like this mechanism to like right the wrong kind of thing.
Mm, mm.
And laxative abuse is another form of bulimia, like all of that compensatory mechanism is the word I wanted. It's a
That, that's a
compensate.
big one.
Yeah. And it's like so food and body and self-worth and appearance and all these things are like in a massive like knot hairball kind of thing. And
Yeah.
it's complex and it's really nuanced. And it's, in my perspective, the root of it, the nugget of it all is trauma. And not just the one time event or the multiple time events. It's actually like what happens in the wake of trauma, like what we decide about ourselves, how we view ourselves, how we view our worth, our how we need to get love in the world and how we avoid pain. And so for so many of us who have struggled with like body dysmorphia or like rigidity with the body, orthorexia is another, manifestation of that, where you eat food and it's like it's almost like this punishing, rigid space we go into to make sure we look a certain way, because if we don't, we won't be worthy of love.
Yes, for sure. And I am curious when, so you obviously went through treatment, and in the treatment was when you realized that there was the past trauma and to the connection of the food. Um, can you share with how that was done? Before getting on this podcast with you, my daughter-in-law came over with a mutual friend, and they were visiting me for a little bit. And I was telling them that I was going to interview you, and the my girlfriend started talking about EMDR therapy,
Mhm.
and I was like, oh, I had done that, and when I did the EMDR, a lot of stuff had come out of my of losing my dad at such a young age that I had never really thought of or had suppressed. That being said, um, is that kind of how it went for you as well? How you connected those two things? Because I'm just thinking of the audience, and I'm thinking to myself, there's so many times that I have so many clients that come to me and they just want to know the right amount of macros, or what exercises should be doing. I can't get this weight off, and I'm struggling, and I know it's going to be deeper than just you're not eating the right amount of macros, but that's where they start all the time. And so for them to understand that it's okay to do these things, and it's okay to get uncomfortable, because that could really, it's really what fixed the issue is the root cause, like you say, as opposed to just thinking that it's something as simple as I'm eating too many calories or I'm not exercising enough. For you, how did that journey work?
Well, I went to treatment when I was in my early 20s, and none of the trauma was revealed at that point. It
Oh,
was, as I mentioned, like behavioral modification focused, and so it was just like it was not at the root. And that kind of, I remember even at that young age, and with all of like what I was navigating, I remember like starting to understand this is not it. Like this ain't it,
yeah.
like there's something that's driving these patterns, and I have no idea what it is. But I think it really like activated this seeker in me of like, okay, if that's not it, and I've exhausted those options, I relapsed, I went back to treatment, it still wasn't it. It gave me, I benefited in some ways, but it was not moving the dial for me.
Mm,
And it really like launched me onto this path of seeking. And that's when I found psychedelics. And in that ayahuasca experience, that's when everything was revealed. And
okay.
that ceremony was so profound because one of the things that ayahuasca shared with me, because I had already started to pursue, I had already graduated with my degree in dietetics and nutrition. I was about to sit for the board to become a licensed RD. And I was in this space with my career. Like, am I going to go work for somebody? Am I going to launch my practice? What do I want? And I started to receive like these teachings from the medicine of like, what is weight actually? What is
Mm,
it's armor. Weight, in my perspective, is pain pushed down by food.
wow.
It's accumulated pain that we have just pushed down and suppressed and shoved away
Mm,
with food. Why? Because food is yummy and gooey and comforting and soothing and all the things we really crave on an emotional level,
mhm.
but it will never satisfy that type of hunger.
That's really powerful what you just said. really, really powerful. I just want to make note of that. I think that's not said enough for sure. Didn't mean to interrupt you, but
No, no.
that's just beautifully put. And so I told you this at the beginning as well. So I have my old dermatologist. If you guys are watching the nobody watches YouTube, but like my face is like bright red because I scrubbed the crap out of it last night. He wouldn't be too happy with me, but my old dermatologist became a friend of mine, and he was I'm telling you this because it's the only thing I know about this. I'm going to be such a blank slate for you, which I think would be good for my audience as well. But he once was, checking me for, skin cancer and all that stuff, and he started talking about he was growing mushrooms, and to me, I was like, you're a dermatologist. What are you growing mushrooms for? What, I didn't understand. He tried to explain it to me, and I kind of got it, but I really don't. So layman me, I'm very interested in the psychedelics because when you say that, I think platform shoes, I think bell bottoms, I think Led Zeppelin, I
70s, yeah.
getting getting high off of things like mushrooms. That is my very naive when I hear that word. I would love for you to explain to me and to the audience. I guess everything, and I hate to be so broad, but like where where does this come from?
Yeah.
Why why isn't it used more?
Yeah.
What do you use it for? I'm just so
I'll
curious.
tell you, yeah, it's so beautiful. First of all, there are many, many different types of psychedelics, medicines, some synthetic like MDMA or ketamine,
Yeah.
LSD,
Mhm.
and there's naturally derived like ayahuasca, peyote, mushrooms, cannabis also. Like they induce altered states of consciousness. And one of the things they all have in common, which is really, really profound, is that they disrupt. There's a complex in the brain called the default mode network. It's this like different regions are connected and they communicate all the time. And that's basically where the ego lives. That's
Oh,
the part of our brain that is responsible for like self-referential thinking, rumination, time, so focusing on the past, or, anxiety about the future. That's this default mode network. Psychedelics, universally speaking, disrupt the chant like the frequencies of communication in that complex of the brain, which
okay.
basically like makes it go offline. Like it's as if the psychedelics like turned off the microphone of the ego so that other regions of the brain have the opportunity of communicating. And that's why repressed memories come forth. That's why alterations in perspective and insight and huge breakthroughs in compassion and self-love and unity consciousness. That's why all of these things become available, is literally because like the default mode network is offline. And so you get to experience yourself without this like really like harsh critic
Mm,
for a moment, for a bit, depending on the length of the experience. And that in and of itself is so profoundly healing because that's truth. All of the constructs of the ego, they're not rooted in truth. I'm not actually unworthy. That's a story I was telling myself because of how I was treated. But once
mm,
that thing goes offline and I actually can tune into like the worthiness that I am inherently, or the level of compassion that I really deserved for what I was going through instead of like shame, like
yeah.
that alters my self-perception fundamentally and permanently. And that is like, I don't know anything else that does that on the face of the earth.
Okay. So um I want to say products. I don't even know how you would describe them. Are they
Substances?
are the substances? Okay. Um, is it something? Is it open to the public? Is it prescription? How does one come about?
Yeah. So many of them, unfortunately, because of Nixon in the 70s, the whole Vietnam, like he was like the whole drop out and tune in, whatever, the psychedelic movement, Timothy Leary, Ram Dass, all of that kind of stuff. He like shut down all psychedelic research in the 70s. And so a lot of it went underground, but a lot of it also became Schedule One. So mushrooms and like other substances like that are like Schedule One, which says they're the most addictive and they're so dangerous. Not true. Not
Mm,
at all true. They're not addictive. Nobody wants to like go and deal with their deepest traumas on a regular basis. Like
right,
it's medicine. It's not
right.
they're not drugs. Of course they can be used recreationally, but you could take something at a concert and go into a full-blown like process, which could
Hmm.
be really, really beautiful or really scary depending on, the context.
Hmm.
So unfortunately, a lot of them are still illegal, but the ones that are legal right now is ketamine, which
Hmm.
is a synthetic, but it's beautiful. It's incredible, incredibly antidepressive. It can alleviate suicidal ideation within 4 hours of a single treatment, which no SSRI in the history of SSRIs has ever done. It's incredibly anti-inflammatory, systemically and neurologically. It is a sub-anesthetic dissociative. So that's actually the psychedelic that I use in my work when I'm helping people really access the root of their disconnection from self, but disordered eating or body dysmorphia, weight, etc.
Mm.
Because it allows people who've lived in somewhat of a dissociated pattern, people who have used food to kind of check out so long, it allows them to start to like dip their toes in the water of emotion from like a partially removed perspective. And so if, for an example, like they'll be in a psychedelic experience, a ketamine experience, and they may feel fear, but it occurs in the body as like, oh wow, like this is fear. I can explore fear. I can be with fear. I can breathe through fear. Like, what does fear have to teach me? As opposed to like being totally taken by the fear and like terrified. And so it allows them to start to like expand their capacity of being with things that are challenging. And then we nurture that in real time and integration so that next time they're triggered or they're feeling overwhelmed that they would normally reach for whatever, the cookies, they now know how to be with this in a way that's actually really supportive for them so
Hmm.
that they actually get their needs met. They may need comfort. They may need like to feel safe. They may need to express truth, like whatever that need really is. It's never actually food.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
never food. And
Yeah.
so they get to like just eliminate that pattern. And that's where I see upwards of 40 pounds of weight loss in one, round of my program, not because of a rigid diet, but because they're no longer using copious amounts of food to numb themselves. They're waking up.
Yeah. And then again, that's really powerful as well. Would so people are seeking you out because of your the way that you to help people. So I don't know if this is a fair question or not, but is do you have are you in this practice because of this, or do you just see it so often that most people who do have issues with getting weight off, or even not getting it off but keeping it off and not bringing it back on, there is trauma. I mean, the percentage is that
Every time.
okay?
Every single time. There's emotional and energetic weight just as there's physical weight. Like I was a dietitian. I knew exactly what to eat. I knew
Yep.
all the things. I knew all the supplements. I knew how to heal my gut and my thyroid, and I was doing all the things. But it wasn't until I offloaded so much shame and so much like disgust and so much betrayal and injustice and all the things that my body could get leaner because I was like lightening the load emotionally and energetically. It doesn't matter how hard I was working out 5 days a week, lifting, resistance training, hit training, whatever the hell I was doing all the things.
Yeah.
It wasn't moving.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was emotional.
Yeah. And I just yesterday, had a conversation with a client who's telling me she's doing everything right, and I'm like,
I bet
"Mm,
she is.
yeah." And it could be
Probably
very,
is.
yeah, much. I will refer her to this podcast for sure. Um, can you, so I'm a prude. I don't know how else to say it. I'm even, I actually, I always joke, I'm a very expensive drunk. It takes me a lot of alcohol to get drunk.
Mhm.
And so I always get sick of drinking before I actually get to that place. I've never done marijuana, because for me, and I'm just only sharing this because I'm thinking maybe if I have some listeners that are kind of in the same place I am, you can set their mind at ease. I am personally afraid of losing control. That's
Yeah.
one of the reasons I've never, I don't drink really heavily. I've never tried any kind of recreational drug because I'm afraid of that feeling of being out of control. And so when I hear this, there's a little part of me that's like, that's scary. I'm, I'm going to be out of control and I don't know what I'm going to say or what I'm going to do. Can you
Yeah.
walk us through the actual journey of the psychedelics to ease our
Yeah. I mean, well, like, first of all, like, what is control?
mind?
Like what is
Yeah.
actually control? Like what are you actually controlling? I understand there's like a level of familiarity and you know how to navigate in this realm and all of those things.
Yeah.
And so I'd say like for the people that are dissatisfied with their experience of life, for the people that are feeling stuck and like unhappy with their life, unfulfilled, in that dense space. And this is their familiarity. This is their comfort. It's not comfortable at all, but this is like their known reality. There is there is a necessary ingredient to change, to change something of their current reality. And for me, that well, there's a couple. It's a desire for something to be different is
Sure.
number one, probably a willingness, but also like an element of trust. And that could be like trust in yourself and your intuition if you're feeling really called for this. And even though it's really scary, like there's that trust, or it could be the person that you really feel safe with.
Huh?
Like my clients trust me. A lot of them have never experienced psychedelics before and they come. And then and trust in something greater that
Yeah.
like I don't know why I'm being called to this thing. I didn't know about ayahuasca before I sat with ayahuasca. And if I knew about it, I probably wouldn't have sat. But my intuition was like so loud that I'm
Mm.
like, I'm doing this thing because the way that I'm living right now is like hellish. I was suffering like hard and
Mm.
wanted something better. And I was willing to like take that leap. And I'm so
Sure.
grateful that I did. And there are like varying degrees of surrender that one may need to lean into for different types of medicine. For example, ayahuasca, like it takes a big ability to surrender because that is a very abstract experience. Whereas ketamine, especially like in the doses in which I work with, is very, very gentle. It's super gentle. It's really heart opening, just like MDMA is really heart opening. And I feel so much like compassion and so much love that I don't have to actually like face off with my shadow. Like that doesn't typically, that's
Yeah.
not, for different doses, of course, but for like lighter doses, like that's not usually what you're encountering. And so ketamine is a really beautiful place to start for people that I've heard this so many times, I'm afraid of losing control. And for the people that are willing to kind of like lean into that altered state, you realize that like you don't need to have control in those spaces because it's so loving.
Mm. So is it, so you work, obviously you have to work with people in person, or can this be done, through like Zoom? And does I am such a baby, Jillian. Like, would I
Okay.
take the psychedelic and then call you and be like, okay, do,
No,
now we talk?
no, no. So there are at-home ketamine companies
Okay.
uh, that will take somebody through a medical intake process, a psychiatric intake process,
Okay.
and if they get cleared for this as like a suitable treatment, they will send a prescription of ketamine to their home. So
Okay.
everything is above ground, they're managed by a team on a medical level, and then once a client goes through that process, they're already working with me for 4 weeks before they touch medicine. So that in
Okay.
one of my programs is called the Garden, they sit with medicine 3 times over the course of that 3 months on weeks 5, 7, and 9. And so they're using their prescription from this other company. And I am essentially what we call holding space. So I am opening up the ritual. I am there the entire time. It's not on Zoom, it's on another video call that's HIPAA compliant and secure. But I am there the entire time. And sometimes, like intuitively using my voice to help guide them into a certain space, like an element of their story that they're wanting to explore, or things like that. So they're never like just on their own and, kind of free falling. It's very well supported leading up to their initial experience,
Mhm.
after, during, post. It's like integration heavy, really, really supported. And that for me is the most important part, the integration. Because, in medicine experiences, you're shown a lot. It's really insightful, it's really illuminating, it's beautiful. But it's like what you do with it that actually creates transformation. And I don't believe that integration gets enough airtime. I think people are more interested in the actual psychedelic experience, which I understand. It's exciting, but the aftermath is like really weaving a new tapestry, like creating a new tapestry for your
Yeah.
life.
It must be very rewarding, to help people
Yeah.
get to that level. You're very, very educated. Uh, being a dietitian and stuff, can you tell me where you feel like all the schooling that you went through has helped you in what you're doing today and maybe what where it fell short? Because I feel like there's you blended the two very well together, but maybe what you learned traditionally in your school versus what you're incorporating now, there is some a little bit of friction there, a little bit of
So
something
much.
filtered. Yeah.
The most friction, to tell you the truth. I'm a very different breed of dietitian. I learned a lot. I had a really beautiful mentor when I was in school who told me like the difference between a really great and effective dietitian and one who's not so good is like your grasp on biochemistry. How
Mm,
much can you grasp biochem? And so I busted my butt in those classes, and really started to understand the mechanisms of metabolism and physiology
sure.
that I'm effective as a dietitian, incredibly effective, and it doesn't light me up. It doesn't light me up because what's missing is the why someone got to that state, is
Sure.
the what's really going on beneath the surface. Because a protocol, the best, most effective protocol for their physiology, is not going to get them where they want to get to unless they deal with the emotional, psychological, and even spiritual roots of that status. And so I actually went to University of Western States to complete the very first, it was the only program at the time, Masters of Science in Human Nutrition and Functional Medicine.
Mm.
And I got about 75% of the way done and left. And my ego was like, girl, what are you doing? Because I'm
And you're
still
picking
paying off those student loans. But it was
up.
just like, this is what's missing. Like, I want to, the trauma informed aspect, the psychology of eating, all of like the undercurrent. I understood that, one of the greatest antecedents or predictive factors of obesity or chronic illness is childhood trauma. That's really all I needed to know from that entire expensive freaking program. That's all. Because it's
Yeah.
like, if we can address the trauma, which by the way, psychedelics are like the best tool for, then we can help people prevent and reverse illness. And that's just a great byproduct because what they're really getting is like deep connection with themselves, is like living in alignment, living a life like they are so lit up by. That
Mhm.
was not even in my like my frame of reference 10 years ago. I never thought that was possible. I'm
Mhm.
living it now.
Yeah. Yeah. That's exciting.
Oh,
So your business is the root cause method, which truly love that name. I think that we do miss the mark when it comes to instead of just working with those symptoms, really trying to get down deep to what's causing the issue. And like you just said, I think that it's not addressed enough. And I love to hear I love the way that you do it as well. It's not something that is mentioned near that often. And do you think that this is something that will become more and more popular as the years go by, or will it just always have its those people that don't want this kind of teachings to be out there? You know what I mean?
both. You know what I mean? Like I'm here to spread the message in a massive way as much as I can. I'm just getting started. And there are, people that are this work is not, it doesn't resonate with. There are people that they're just not available, or it can occur to some people as incredibly confronting.
Yeah.
But they'd rather not look, and wherever people are on their own path, like I honor that. It's really just like I'm here for the people that are ready for what they want.
Mhm.
Because ignorance is not bliss in my perspective. Ignorance
Agreed.
is freaking miserable. It's numbness, it's dissociation. It's miserable.
Yeah. I agree with that. So besides, incorporating this or with incorporating the psychedelics, I should say, and being a registered dietitian, what for my, this is the time of year we're getting to the point, I can't believe it's December already,
Yeah.
that, here comes January 2nd, where everybody has their New Year's resolution. And I would just love with your education, your unique mindset, um, how how do you feel a woman can do the best to take care of herself? And I don't want to say aside from confronting past trauma, that's number one. That's obvious. But just generally speaking, like I mentioned to you, I've had quite a few dietitians on the podcast, and the view, I don't know. I don't want to say that everybody is, people have their own unique versions of what it is, and I just would love to hear yours.
The first thing that popped into my head was like, make time to feel.
Okay.
Because if you're willing to feel the thing, the grief, the sorrow, the rage, the insecurity, if you can feel it and actually like be with that emotional experience, you don't need the popcorn or, the cookies to numb that thing. You've already felt it. So the food loses its charge. It loses that kind of energetic pull because the purpose has been already like served. And
Sure.
so make time to feel. And for me, like journaling is a huge, I love journaling because it bridges the gap between like the intellectual and the emotional. It
Sure.
helps us like find our way down into the body when that may not be like the automatic.
Hmm. For sure. So no, you don't have any kind of mindset on diet. I mean,
Oh
fatigue,
yeah.
but
But
like
everybody knows that. You can put in ChatGPT, what should I eat to like lose weight? And
true
you'll
these
get a
days.
zillion, you know what I mean? I eat a very like unprocessed diet. I eat a lot of real, really high quality, beautiful animal protein. Fortunate,
Mhm.
to be in here in Texas. Beautiful fat. I eat fruit. And I don't touch gluten unless I'm in Italy. And I have chocolate or whatever I desire every once in a while because but I'm satisfied with the way that I feel good. My hormones have never been more regulated and my gut and all the things. And it's just like that's easy.
Sure.
But if you're using food to try to avoid feeling something or to try to make yourself feel another thing, feel better, feel distracted or soothed or whatever, it's self-abandonment. You're leaving your body. You're checking out of the present moment and the way that you feel, and you're being left behind.
Hmm.
And so if you can like start to kind of have your own back in that way of like, okay, I'm not going to leave. I'm not going to check out. I'm going to stay here. And it's uncomfortable. And it's really cringy sometimes. And these things can be hard to feel. But as you practice feeling them, your capacity for being with those things expands. And all of a sudden you become that nurturing caretaker that you always needed and didn't have.
Mm, that's beautiful. So it's the feel and the journaling, which I totally agree with. I think that's wonderful. And then just, eating I always tell people to look at your plate. Do you see a lot of nature on your plate
Yeah,
as opposed to the processed foods?
yeah, yeah.
Um, if I can step back real quick to um, the disordered eating versus eating disorder,
Mhm.
and it being an area that you work in, do you find that, and I'm just going to say women, I know you probably work with
Mhm.
every spectrum, but for the most part, have women listeners that they come to you thinking that they just might be a little disordered, to find out that they actually do have an eating disorder, or the other way around, that they're like, oh my gosh, I must have an eating disorder because I overeat, and then just to find out, no, you're just eating too much. Do you find a
I
gap there?
see, I see a lot of stuff. To tell you the truth, and just to clarify, I don't actually work with people who have acute eating disorder. So if
Okay.
somebody comes and they're in active anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, I don't feel I'm the most suitable. They
Okay.
need to stabilize, and then when they desire recovery, I'm
Mm,
their
you're your
woman.
girl.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and on the kind of contrary, I've had consultation calls with many, not many, but like a good amount of people, both men and women, who are clinically obese and
Mhm.
they don't believe they have an emotional relationship with food.
Okay.
They just
Okay.
want to they want weight loss. And so I
Yeah.
feel like emotional eating and the messaging around it has such a stigma, has so much shame carried to it. No, I don't do that. I just boredom eat. And it is the same thing. If you're constantly overriding your physiological hunger and fullness cues. If you're eating past the point of fullness or eating when you're not when you're past the point of discomfort, when you're, engaging in the things that I described before, there is an emotional component there.
Yeah.
There is always an emotional component. And so we don't have to diagnose. I don't diagnose anybody. I
Hmm.
actually don't believe in putting somebody in a box and saying, you're this. I don't agree with that. It's like, okay, I don't even agree with like food addiction or sugar addiction. I don't believe in those titles. I think that there is trauma. And so let's explore what that looks like and how it's manifested and the purpose that food has served in your life and the costs of this relationship with food and what else is available for you because there's so much of it.
So, with the rise of so many diseases and the rise of obesity in children, teens, and adults, I don't know how to word that. Do you feel there has been more trauma over the last, 50 years with the rise of all of this, or do we have to do we have to blame big food?
I
Where's your
think,
mindset on the
yeah.
because we do have, you look at the majority of Americans, and it's actually very rare to see someone, very thin. Um,
Yeah.
and so
I
is
think
it,
it's an interesting question. I don't think that is more trauma now than there used to be. I think there's different types of trauma as opposed to like what there once was. But I believe trauma is like a thread that's woven itself through all of, human history and in like the crazy battles and wars and yeah, nomadic. Like there's been trauma all throughout our history. I just believe that the level of convenience of food now is more convenient than ever. I believe that the quality, or I should say like the lack of quality of food is worse than ever, the accessibility of it. And my unique perspective on this is that I believe that emotional eating is just one expression of trauma, right? Like
Mhm.
this desire to self-medicate in some ways, to self-soothe. That's really at the root of it. But why people reach for food instead of cocaine or alcohol or benzos? Like it's a different flavor, it's a different texture of wounding. And in
Mm.
my perspective, it has a lot to do with a desire of being nurtured, a desire for that cozy nurturance, and that is inherently linked with the mother, with the feminine.
Yeah.
And with the decline, well, now it's kind of like, yeah, there's just wounding living in this patriarchal society that has been magnified. And it's not like women are in a more compromised space than we once were because now we have many more rights and things like that. It's just a different expression of it. So I think it's multifactorial, but it's an interesting question.
Yeah. And which, speaking of people taking their, with the obesity epidemic, people eating beyond the hunger, can I ask your personal thoughts on like GLP-1s?
Oh yeah. Oh girl. Um, It's fascinating to me, like if somebody is clinically obese, GLP-1s can be amazing, can add, years to their life, for sure. But as a first line of defense against childhood obesity, I want to get violent. It enrages me.
Yeah.
It enrages me. It's like this is not the solution. And I myself, because I'm a guinea pig and I just like to try all the things, I've experimented with tirzepatide. And I what was fascinating to me was because I do what I do in my work,
Mhm.
I quickly understood that it eliminated the food noise magically. I was in a really like activated state. I was like selling my house, found mold in my place, like had to leave really quick. It was so triggering. I went nomadic. It was
Mm.
very, very intense. And it was while I was on this substance. And it was fascinating to me because I would have normally, wanted to self-soothe with food because that program's been there since I was 3.
Yeah.
Like that thing in like in the really survival activated spaces, that is still the thing that comes online, even though I know that's not going to make me feel better and
Mhm.
I can work with it now. It's my brain's like, I have an idea, let's go eat, like it's the first thing that comes. And so that was not there during this like super activated space. And I was able to just be with, feel the emotions that wanted to be felt instead of pushing them down with food and then finally, like, back end finding my way to them.
Hmm.
So it made my emotional process really powerful because like the first line of defense of my subconscious was no longer there. But
Hmm.
then, weaning off it, even though I went really, really, really slow, I was like, the people that A, don't go slow or that have no idea about like the psychology of eating are going to regain the weight in a rapid pace and going to feel that much more like disempowered, hopeless, compromised physiologically speaking, from like a muscle standpoint, and a gastrointestinal standpoint, and a psychological standpoint. Like it has massive, massive costs.
Yeah, yeah. So, um, for the person that, because you don't have to be, I mean, people can, which is your whole practice, I believe, and the root cause leads to trauma. But for people, I think maybe that even only need to lose 10, 15, 20 pounds, want to use this because, like you said, the food noise is so high. So
Yeah.
my question to you is there's that option, but like you said, it's something you've got to, I'm answering my own question. They working with you or doing the psychedelics and really getting down to the root cause will make it so you don't need this, even a microdose of these GLP-1s to get rid of that food noise. Because if you can really get to the root cause of understanding why food is always at the forefront of your thoughts, it's always, it's so important to you. You're eating breakfast wondering what you're going to have for lunch. If you go this route instead of the GLP-1 route, it can it can
Yeah.
really get rid of the
Like,
food noise in
like
a
why
healthier
is
way.
noise there in the first place?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, what is the food noise? Like, what's it chirping? Like,
Yeah.
oh, go eat that thing. It's gonna make you feel better. It's like if you can get underneath it and understand like what are you trying to feel better from? And actually like meet yourself there, you don't need to reach outside of you for anything, whether it's a substance or a drug or the next intervention that's so promising. Like, you get to be the source of that for you.
So that led me to the question of, and I was looking at your beautiful earrings.
Thank you.
They're gorgeous. What was I going to say? Something about, shoot, it'll come back to me. It always does. But in the meantime, where do you see you in your practice in, 3 to 5 years? What are you hoping, in a perfect world, and with the obviously the drive and the love that you have for what you do, where are you in 5 years from now? What's happening?
Really interesting question. I'm actually very much in like a transition space right now with my work where um yeah, there's this dissonance feeling, this like lack of resonance with the world of nutrition and dietetics and license and all that kind of stuff. And my messaging has been so hyper focused on like emotional eating. And it's really just one type of dissociative pattern.
Mm,
It's really just one. And so I'm actually feeling this desire to like broaden my work. And I'm not entirely sure what that looks like. Like emotional eating and supporting the physiology in whatever way that looks will probably still be a part of it because that's what I know so deeply and what I've lived and what
mhm,
I've come out of myself. But there sexual abuse is just ridiculously, devastatingly pervasive.
mhm,
And a lot of those people, a lot of those, especially like men and women, really deal with excess weight. But that's not the only reason someone would carry excess weight. It's also not the only reason someone would engage in other things like, alcoholism or narcotic abuse or, scrolling or whatever, whatever their thing is. And so I'm really, really here to like help wake people up from numbness.
That's
And
great. And
so,
I love the way you keep saying emotional eating, and that's really how I should have framed it from the very beginning, as opposed to, eating disorders. Is that emotional eating, which is everybody almost, I feel like.
almost everyone, regardless of what your physique looks like, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like you were saying, like the orthorexics or like the people that
Yeah.
are on the GLP-1s, like bless them. And like maybe they're gonna have to be on that for the rest of their life. I don't know the consequences. Nobody does yet.
Yeah.
Um, But like what happens if you get off those, like it's still there. It's in the psyche.
Mhm.
And so yeah, I don't know yet what it's going to look like, but I'm really passionate about this. I know what it feels like to be uh walking, like sleepwalking in life and numb and totally out of my body and disconnected from my intuition and my power and my ability to create, and so many incredible gifts have come online since like coming back into my body and reconnecting with myself and my power. And I live for like witnessing, especially women, like wake up to themselves, like live in a space of like they're turned on to life, like they're just on.
Yeah.
And so I don't know yet.
But you've got the obviously the passion and the the science, the passion and the science behind what you're doing is obviously very strong. I remembered my question. Um, so, you know, we talked about the people using food, for emotional eating and for to numb themselves or to soothe themselves. Speaking, from a nutritionist standpoint, what if they just have eaten really poorly and they're super blood sugar dysregulated and they've got these terrible sugar cravings and stuff? Do you feel like that? I mean, is there that possibility as well, that it's not always that the person listening to this isn't going, oh my gosh, I must have, trauma that I'm suppressing or I don't know about and I haven't gotten to, or it, could it legitimately be just somebody has just eaten like crap for, years on end, and so they're so dysregulated and their body's just constantly saying you're hungry because it's nutrient void.
Right.
Is there that option as well, would you
I
say?
mean, I mean, I see where you're going with this, and I really like the question. There for sure is like a practical component, right? If you're eating, tons of refined sugar, the microorganisms in your gastrointestinal tract are going to like inherently have you crave more sugar because that's how they survive. Like there's a
Yeah.
practical.
Yeah.
Think about the person who eats really crappy. They're not taking care of themselves. They're not treating themselves with care. That's trauma.
Yeah, you're
It
right.
is like it's like a low self-worth. They don't feel worthy of like buying really high quality food because maybe it's a little bit more expensive, or they don't invest in like learning how to cook a decent, basic meal, or they don't feel worthy of like sitting down at the table and like feeding themselves slowly, and they're always on the go and they deprioritize themselves and da da da. Da. All of that noise, that's trauma.
Yeah, you're right.
Anyway, like trauma doesn't have to be like a catastrophic, being molested, or the death of a parent. It could also be like having five siblings and your mom and dad are like working their butts off and they loved you, but they just didn't have the space emotionally or physically, whatever, to like nurture you or to like hear you or process emotion with you. And so you felt neglected and you made stories about your like everyone in my perspective has an element of trauma. It's part of the human experience.
Yeah.
It's all of us. It's what we have particular like flavors of wounding, and in my perspective, it's our opportunity to overcome that, and we get the teachings along the way that we then get the opportunity of sharing, and that's this dance we're in. That's this game.
Yeah, and I love that too because I mean, there's I really enjoyed the therapy that I went through. An old mentor of mine was really big. She says everybody needs therapy. She's like everybody needs it. It's something you should enjoy. You should enjoy just being able to talk with somebody and the stuff that you discover about yourself, even if it is in the moment hard. You know, when you process through it, it's so enlightening. It's
Absolutely.
so many people are so confused,
Mhm.
uh, lost, and like you said, just they're numb. And I
Yeah.
so many people, and so I agree. Even if it's maybe not even food, like you said, it could be alcohol, it could be porn, it could be gambling, anything like that. But you're finding these ways to cope, and if you get to that absolute root cause, literally what a life changer that would be. um
It changed my life. Learning about my story in an ayahuasca experience was not comfortable at all, but it wasn't re-traumatizing. I wasn't
mhm.
I wasn't
Good
being
to
like
hear.
re-traumatized and like out of control and terrified. No, no. And it was the greatest blessing of my life to
Mhm.
learn. that story. The truth will set you free. Like it did. It gave me my life.
Mhm.
I didn't understand why I was in a prison. And then I saw.
Yeah. So
And
the ayahuasca, I'm not very familiar with that as well, but is that something that you're kind of studying too, or do you have any interest in that side of what helped you heal, or is that what you're doing? Is
Um, I think that there are a lot of beautiful facilitators out there that have been called to the path of serving medicine and have been in hopefully not all of them, but many of them have been initiated and like studying under maestros and like apprenticed and all of this beautiful, necessary, sacred work. I've not done that, but where I feel my gifts are is integration. And
mm,
so like I don't need to be a medicine woman in that respect. I am in my own right with my own gifts, but I'm really powerful at identifying a thread, pulling on it with someone, and the whole freaking thing unravels and supporting them in the reweaving of the tapestry. And I love that stuff and I'm gifted in that way. And so yeah, I like to support in that way and have have talks of like collaboration with other people who are doing more of the medicine serving and things like that. And that feels really great for me.
yeah,
Um, yeah, yeah, I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah. I love the way you said that, to pull the thread, to unwind, and then to reweave. That should be on like this, like on your sweatshirt. I pulled the thread.
I'm a thread puller.
Yeah, there you go. That's yeah, there you go. That's your tagline. I this has been I feel so, I really do. My daughter-in-law said, "Tell me how it went." She goes, "Tell me what you learned." And I feel so much more educated about this kind of a thing myself. So I appreciate that, because that will also help all my listeners. And I'm sure that we have pulled the thread a little bit of some people. If you would share how they could reach out to you if they wanted more information in what you do.
Sure. My website is therootcausemethod.com and I'm pretty active on Instagram, which is Jillian Acosta _RD.
Okay, perfect. Well, is there anything else you'd like to close with?
Oh my goodness. Again, what popped into my mind is like, you know, I feel when I see someone who's carrying excess weight or struggling with their body, my very first reaction is compassion
Mhm.
because it's like I know they went through something hard. I know that they are still kind of carrying
Mhm.
pain. And
Yeah.
so if any of your listeners feel that that's them, it's like we can't shame our way or criticize our way or be rigid with ourselves into a healthier body, into a healthier relationship with ourselves. The doorway, in my perspective, is compassion, is to
Mm.
be actually like willing to look at yourself and be like, wow, I'm holding pain. That's what this weight is. And then from that open-hearted space, so much healing, transformation, juiciness, like joy, pleasure, all the things that you actually really want, that's now possible.
Yeah. And you're obviously a empath, as I am as well. And it's it's a burden to feel that for others. But the fact that you've taken that burden, you've taken your own trauma, you've healed yourself, you have this, empathetic burden that you feel for other people, and you're putting it to practice is pretty incredible. Very
Thank you.
You're welcome. I appreciate you being on here and look forward to having everybody listen to it. And I'm going to find you on Instagram myself and follow you.
Amazing. Such a
And
pleasure for such a newbie in the psychedelic space. You asked some really fun
oh,
questions. I
good,
appreciate you.
good, good. It makes me want to explore more, 100%. And so the door is always open for that kind of a thing. And I appreciate you letting me be the newbie and asking you questions like somebody who's never heard of him before. It was
Go for
very, very enlightening.
it.
Well, you take care, Jillian. Hope you have a great rest of your year. And as I tell everybody else on the Made Fit show, we want you to wake up feeling prepared and we want you to go to bed feeling proud. Have a great day.
You too.